Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really critical, complex, and frankly urgent global environmental challenge: biological invasions.
Hmm.
And this isn't just about, a few invasive weeds in your garden. We're talking about a key driver of planetary change.
Absolutely. It's responsible for massive biodiversity loss and some pretty serious economic instability worldwide.
And to really get our heads around how to manage this huge problem, specifically in Europe, we are diving into a major strategy paper.
We are. It's titled A Scenario-Guided Strategy for the Future Management of Biological Invasions. The work was led by Roura Pascual and a massive team.
Massive is right, 35 experts.
35. And a really multidisciplinary group, too.
From 12 European countries, 3 major stakeholder groups. You've got academia, NGOs, and public administration. So that tells you right away this isn't just theory.
No, this is policy that's designed to survive contact with reality.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really distill their approach. It's a comprehensive, forward-looking strategy for managing invasive species across Europe, and it's specifically designed to handle, deep uncertainty about what the future holds. Okay, so let's start with the stakes. Why is this problem so high stakes right now?
Well, the scientific consensus is pretty clear on this. Invasive species are one of the primary drivers of global environmental change.
Right.
They contribute in a huge way to biodiversity loss, and crucially, they cause what the paper calls unsustainable economic losses all over the world.
And that's not just like the damage to crops or infrastructure.
No, it's that plus the enormous costs of trying to monitor and eradicate them.
And here's the real kicker, the strategic challenge. Despite all these global efforts, like the ones from the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, the number of new non-native species it's still going up.
Dramatically. The source material is very explicit on this. It says there is no sign of saturation. And the situation is particularly acute in Europe. Projections show the number of non-native species, both on land and in the sea, is just going to increase substantially by 2050.
So the challenge for policymakers is that the exact number and the impact of those future invasions, it all depends on these really unpredictable drivers.
Exactly. Things like global GDP or how much regional trade is going to happen. You just can't know for sure.
So if you're using a standard quantitative model, you're sort of forced to make these very specific assumptions, like the economy will grow by exactly 2% or something.
Precisely. And that really limits the plausible futures you can actually plan for. So what the Roura Pascual team did, which I think is so innovative, is they chose to use qualitative scenarios.
Which lets them be more open, more explorative.
Yes. They're instrumental for this kind of planning because they let you test for shocks. Sudden, nonlinear things like a political collapse or a major shift towards isolationism that a quantitative model just can't handle.
That makes perfect sense. You can't put a number on geopolitical breakdown, but
Yeah.
you can definitely plan for the consequences. So tell us about the study itself. How did they get those 35 experts to kind of create a shared vision?
It was a very participatory process, all done through 2 big online workshops.
Bringing everyone together.
Yeah, bringing together academia, NGOs, and public administration. The idea was to make sure the final strategy wasn't just scientifically sound, but also, politically and practically feasible.
So the first step was building the foundation, right? They took 4 existing global scenarios and kind of shrunk them down to the European level.
We downscaled them, yeah. And that created 4 very distinct potential futures. We should probably define those so we all know what we're talking about.
Good idea.
Okay, so first you have lost in Europe. This is the isolationist future. Think low GDP, almost no international cooperation, poor biosecurity. Everyone's just looking out for themselves.
A bit grim.
A bit. Then there's big tech rules Europe. This one has a strong economy, great technology, so you've got amazing monitoring tools. But poor government regulation, very weak public awareness, and low public trust in anything official.
Okay. And the third?
Green local governance. Here, cooperation is strong, but resources are tight. People are very aware of environmental issues, local communities have power, but there's not much in the way of high-tech tools or centralized coordination.
And the last one sounds like the opposite of grim.
It is. Technological pseudopanacea. This is pretty much the optimistic best-case scenario. High-tech, high public awareness, high GDP, and effective coordinated policy across the entire continent.
Okay, so once they had those 4 futures laid out, they set their target. What was the big vision for the strategy?
The vision was ambitious. By 2050, the harmful impacts of invasive species in Europe are substantially reduced compared to today.
And that lines up with existing global goals, right?
It does. It aligns directly with Target 6 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And to get there, they set out 19 specific goals, which they grouped into 4 categories.
Policy, research awareness, and biosecurity.
Exactly, the PIROB framework, as we'll call it.
And then came the stress test. They basically ran those 19 goals through each of the 4 futures to see what would break.
That's a great way to put it. The participants assessed the feasibility of every single goal under each scenario. Was it feasible, partially feasible, or just unfeasible?
And if something was unfeasible,
They'd go back to the drawing board and revise the actions required for that goal, trying to make it more robust, more resilient to that specific kind of future uncertainty.
and this is where, for me, it gets really, really interesting. Because the analysis of the strategy itself revealed probably the most crucial finding of the whole paper.
It really did. It showed this just shocking level of connectivity between all the goals.
How connected are we talking?
On average, each of the 19 goals was associated with 13 of the other 18 goals.
13 out of 18. That's a 72% interconnectedness score.
It's huge.
So what that means if you're a policymaker is you can't just cherry pick. You can't just do the easy research goals or the cheap awareness campaigns.
No. Failure in one area almost guarantees failure across the board. Success absolutely relies on addressing these goals jointly as a system.
Can you give us a concrete example of that connection?
Sure. Let's take monitoring. The paper has recommendation 4, which is to establish a comprehensive monitoring system. That's a biosecurity goal.
Okay.
Well, the paper found that's basically unachievable without recommendation 2, which is cross-sectoral communication and awareness goal.
So why are those two so tightly linked?
Well, think about it. Monitoring on that scale requires vast amounts of citizen science, people on the ground reporting things. Early detection is everything.
Right.
So if you don't succeed in building a unified communication strategy that teaches, say, customs agents, port managers, and just the general public what to look for,
then your expensive high-tech monitoring system is useless.
exactly, because nobody knows what to report or how to report it, or even why it matters. The whole policy just stalls because the public awareness wasn't there to support the action.
That structural insight, that interconnectedness, it pointed them toward 4 keystone goals.
Yes, the ones with the highest number of connections, the ones that really drive the whole system forward. And those 4 keystones became the basis for the paper's 4 big recommendations.
Okay, let's walk through them. What was the first one?
The first keystone was European cooperation. That led to recommendation 1, European cooperation for biosecurity. This calls for a dedicated European agency or some kind of intergovernmental agreement
With real teeth.
with a real mandate and the resources to actually regulate invasive species management across all of Europe.
Now that sounds like some serious bureaucratic heavy lifting. Is there a risk that by the time you set up a massive agency like that, the problem has already gotten way worse?
That's always the political risk, isn't it? But the authors seem to recognize that by focusing on harmonization. The key thing here is that it has to include non-EU states.
Oh, okay.
I mean, look at the Balkans or Eastern Europe. If you don't harmonize your policies and your monitoring standards along those external borders, any work you do internally is just going to be undermined.
So coordination is king. Got it.
Yeah.
What about the second one, communication?
That's recommendation 2, cross-sectoral communication. And this is a huge effort. It's about building a centralized, multilingual communication platform for all of Europe.
And something for schools too, right?
Yep, a dedicated education curriculum. The goal is to create a single, unified voice that can speak to everyone, from politicians to primary school kids, to make sure there's sustained support and knowledge.
Okay, on to the research and data keystone. This is about giving scientists and managers the right tools for the job.
Precisely. Recommendation 3 is data standardization and tools. The paper calls for routinely closing the gaps in our tools for risk and impact assessment.
So everyone using the same methods, the same protocols.
Exactly. Standardizing protocols, creating an open data portal, maybe building on existing things like EASIN, the European Alien Species Information Network, and using new automated ways to handle all that big data.
That feels like an essential shift, getting away from all these fragmented data sources and towards a shared infrastructure that everyone can use.
And finally, that 4th keystone, the monitoring system, that feeds directly into recommendation 4, monitoring, assessment, and priorities.
So building this system?
Building a comprehensive monitoring system at both the European and the country level. For early detection, rapid response. But the critical part here is that the system has to have flexible priorities. It has to be able to adapt quickly as new threats pop up.
Which they do constantly. Okay, let's talk about the payoff of using this whole qualitative method, the stress test results. Did the strategy actually hold up across all 4 of those futures?
Not at all. And that divergence is really the novelty of the approach. The strategy's feasibility changed substantially depending on the future scenario.
So what was the best case?
Predictably, it was the technological pseudo-panacea scenario. High-tech, high-awareness, effective policies. In that world, all 19 goals were highly favorable.
And the worst case? The isolationist future.
Yeah, the disruptive lost in Europe scenario, that was
Yeah.
the worst outcome. Any goal that requires coordination. So the whole policy category, and especially those keystone goals like European cooperation and communication, they became extremely difficult to achieve.
The whole strategy basically falls apart when international coordination breaks down.
It really suffers, yeah.
What I find fascinating is that intermediate scenario, the big tech rules Europe one. You have the money, you have the data, but the social and political side is a mess.
And in that scenario, feasibility was only partial. You might have great AI for monitoring, but because there's no public awareness and weak government coordination, most of the biosecurity goals really struggled.
So the tech alone isn't enough.
Not even close. The paper suggests that without public trust and unified borders, the system just gets overwhelmed. Invasions get widespread before any poorly coordinated government action can stop them. You'd only partially achieve that 2050 vision.
So the success of this whole thing, it's not just about tech or money. It's directly tied to geopolitical stability, to cooperation, and to public trust. That puts it way outside the normal work of, an environmental department.
Absolutely. And the paper is very upfront about the current limitations that are still out there. Limited funding, a lack of strong legal frameworks, these coordination issues between EU and non-EU countries.
And there's also that disconnect you mentioned between scientists, managers, and the public.
A serious disconnect. You have these really conflicting views among the different groups.
Could you give us a quick example? A situation where the scientists say one thing, but the public or managers push back?
Oh, certainly. A classic one is managing charismatic invasive animals, something cute and furry. The scientists might recommend a swift, large-scale culling to protect an endangered native species.
A tough but necessary action.
Right. But if public awareness and buy-in are low, that action can meet with immediate, very emotional public resistance against the killing of animals, no matter what the ecological threat is.
And that just stalls the entire policy.
It stalls everything. It's a perfect example of how the communication strategy failing can make the science totally irrelevant on the ground.
So what does this all mean? What's the big picture here for you, the listener, trying to grasp the core lesson from all this?
The conclusion is, I think, undeniable. Managing biological invasions requires a really decisive, integrated shift. We have to move beyond these fragmented policy silos.
And connect everything up.
Connect different sectors, from transport to education, and harmonize the efforts across all European countries. Those 19 goals are so intricately connected, the only way to succeed is to manage them as a single, unified system, one that's built to withstand geopolitical shocks.
So the key takeaway is that the big shift needs to be towards robust, pan-European cooperation and standardized, open data. A framework that's actually built for resilience against a very uncertain future.
And this strategy really focuses on integrating knowledge with policy. It's trying to address that very real disconnect between the practical, on-the-ground knowledge of managers and the more academic knowledge from researchers. That integration is the real goal.
Which raises a really important question for future research, doesn't it? If integration is the ultimate measure of success, and we know this disconnect between managers and academics is a persistent problem, how can future research actually measure the success of closing that knowledge gap across all these different European countries instead of just, measuring policy implementation rates?
How do you measure the quality of the integration itself?
Exactly. Because that integration is what will determine if the strategy actually works on the ground.
A powerful thought to reflect on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.